Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us here at 4:30. We are 370 days away from electing a new governor here in Wisconsin, and a brand new poll from the Marquette University Law School released this afternoon shows that candidates have a lot of work to do around the state, and that's where we begin today. The poll, conducted October 15th through the 22nd, 846 registered voters, split nearly evenly among Republicans, Democrats, and independents. The margin of error 4.5%. And not surprisingly, the majority do not know enough about any of the candidates. 70% of Republicans and 81% of Democrats don't know how they are going to vote. Now, when asked to choose, Congressman Tom Tiffany leads among GOP candidates with 23% of voters. Madison State lawmaker Francesca Hong leading a crowded Democratic field, just 6% of voters. And we welcome in Dr. Charles Franklin, of course, the poll director down at the MU Law School. So the numbers, as we look at the gubernatorial candidates here, I guess the overarching theme might be nobody seems to know anybody.
I think that's exactly right. Something that I've been saying for a while, that these are non-incumbent candidates in a wide open race. You shouldn't expect them to be very well known at this point. But that was just me talking. Now we have some data, and it shows exactly that. 70% undecided in the Republican primary, 81% undecided in the Democratic primary, and none of them are well known by any standard. And again, that's to be expected, and we're going to have a year until the general election and 8-9 months till the primary. So there's plenty of time for them to get known. But for us political junkies, it's always good to realize that not everybody pays so much attention to these races this far ahead.
Well, let's pay attention. One person in particular who started in May was Washington County Executive Josh Schoeman, who made it a point to go around the state. So he had a several-month head start on everybody trying to get his name out there, and yet 83% of Republicans still don't know who he is. Is that a concerning sign, even though it's this early?
I think it shows he has a lot of work to do. You know, part of what we find in previous primary races for non-incumbents is that they start out with name ID between 10 and 20%, which is roughly where Schoeman is. And that only gradually rises through the spring, despite all of the chicken dinners they're doing at party meetings around the state. We really see the rise in name ID and developing opinions about them coming as late as June and July, when voters really start to focus on that August primary. So on the one hand, I would say to Schoeman, but also to the other candidates, don't be discouraged by your low ID. That's quite normal at this point, but also it shows that you have a lot of work to do, and building ties with the grassroots in personal appearances around the state is really important for organizing. But for the mass public to get to know you, you're going to wait until TV advertising starts to kick in.
On the other side, such a crowded field right now for Democrats. You mentioned in summer before the primaries when you really start to see some movement. But with a field that large, does that change that calendar as to when they should start seeing some movement?
Yeah. It makes it all the more important for someone to start to break out and get noticed. And that can start sooner rather than later. But Tony Evers in 2018, when he was state school superintendent, started at about 15% name ID and didn't hit 30 until sometime in May or early June. So again, this is a long, slow process. The one thing that's going on here with such a crowded field on the Democratic side is that they're all roughly at the same level of name ID. And so there's kind of a premium on any of them being able to establish more recognizable image sometime sooner rather than later. But I wouldn't put a date on that. I don't think March is the deadline for that. But over the course of the summer, or spring, I mean, do we see name ID going up faster for some candidates than for others? And that did happen with Evers. He was also in a crowded field in 2018. But he managed to build some ID whereas some of the also-rans in 2018 never saw a whole very much uptick in name recognition.
We'll keep an eye on that. We'll also keep an eye on how they fare up here in Northeast Wisconsin, the third largest market in the state. We are very purple here in Northeast Wisconsin. We will have a big impact on the elections in 2026, the statewide elections certainly. How much work do candidates need to do in this market, because we don't have any from around here?
No, I think they do. Across both the Republican and the Democratic candidates, the Green Bay market had lower name recognition for the candidates than the Madison or Milwaukee markets in the South, and that northern and western part of the state outside of the Green Bay market. That's Tom Tiffany's congressional district, and he was much better known there. 60% were able to recognize him there versus just 39% statewide.
All right, let's flip now out of the governor's race to Supreme Court. We have been inundated the last two election cycles, two most expensive judicial races in history. Not surprising that these candidates are both over 80%. People don't know enough about them. But one of the, if you want to point to, criticisms of the last couple elections was the candidates discussing issues that they may have to rule on in the future, i.e. abortion, with Janet Protasewicz. How do people come in on the poll on this? Is this troublesome to voters as much as it is to the opposite candidate?
Yeah, it's not troublesome to voters, which is a little surprising, but 83% said they wanted the Supreme Court candidates to talk about issues so that voters knew what they stood for. Only 17% said that they wanted them to stay away from talking about issues so as not to appear to prejudge future cases. So this is a dilemma, because there are rules for judicial candidates that limit what they're supposed to talk about. But the public is hungry to have some idea of what candidates stand for. And that was true in this past spring's election as well, where it was around 80% that wanted them to talk about issues.
All right, Dr. Charles Franklin, it's good to see you again. We'll be doing this on a more regular basis as we get closer and closer to a very important 2026 here in Wisconsin. Thanks so much.
Thank you.